Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to do module 68, which is all about advertising and product differentiation. This is kind of a neat module. I like just to kind of read it over. It has only a small part of it is actually on the exams, but it's a lot of real world applications and it's kind of just some neat stuff. So I'd encourage you, you're bored, you're like, hey, I like economics. It's kind of cool. Read this module over. It's kind of neat. So let's take a look at the check your understandings. It says, for each of the following types of advertising, explain whether it's likely to be useful or wasteful from the standpoint of consumers. And in most of these questions, by the way, you can kind of do probably without actually reading too much of the module, but advertisements explaining the benefits of aspirin. Benefit because it conveys information, because increases information. So we can talk about advertising and say there's actual value in it, right? It creates information. Advertisements for Bayer aspirin. It's just kind of possibly a little bit of both, right? It could be wasteful from the standpoint of the consumers because you could argue that it's just a waste of their time to try to convey the brand name. But you could also argue, and I'm going to write this because I like to be contrarian, benefit, right? And this is totally probably, this is not the right answer, but I'm going to say this because brands signal quality. Now, in the case of aspirin, it's literally exactly the same as generic, right? Except aspirin, which is really, so this is stretching it. But the idea of having a brand name is that it signals quality to a consumer who otherwise doesn't have a lot of information about a particular product. Now, aspirin is aspirin is aspirin. In fact, Bayer used to have an actual trademark on aspirin in the United States until World War I, when the US went to war with Germany and we canceled all their trademarks. And ever since then, Bayer has had an actual trademark on the word aspirin in other countries, but not in the United States. So aspirin is aspirin is aspirin, but the idea of having a brand is that it signals quality to consumers who don't actually have that much information. So again, it provides that same goal. Advertisements that state how long a plumber or electrician has been in business, that's the same thing. We can say it's beneficial. And you could probably argue otherwise, but I'd say it's beneficial because it increases information. If your plumber just started out yesterday, then you might want to know that, how many toilets have you fixed before you came into my house and tried to mess around with it? So number two, some industry analysts have stated a successful brand name is like a barrier to entry. Explain. I'd say that's true. It's not actually asking that, is it? No. It's your incompetent economics teacher. Because they would say that because if there's a successful brand name, if there's a successful brand, then consumers won't trust the other one or the new ones, right? Consumers don't trust, man, my handwriting's bad, don't trust new entrants. That's kind of how I'm going to say this. So the idea is that if you have a really landmark brand, it can be really hard for other brands to break into it. And if they're new entry into the market, because everybody's like, well, I trust that brand, that one's quality and it signals quality, so I'm going to use that one. And so it's a barrier to entry because other people won't, they won't be able to buy the consumers won't buy the products. It's kind of the idea. All right, that's a terrible way of explaining that. Number one, multiple choice. You can tell that this is one of these days here. It's going to be one of these days. Which of the following is type of product differentiation? They differentiate by style or type. They do. It's location and quality. And by the way, if you were wondering, like, how did I know that? Well, you can literally, if we look here, how firms differentiate, style or type. Didn't read any of that. Location, quality, done. So we'd say all of them, E. Number two, which of the following market structures will they advertise? They do it in oligopolies and monopolistic competition. So that's 2 and 3, D. They don't do it in perfect competition because they all have identical products and people know that. Advertising is an attempt to affect which of the following? Consumer taste and preferences. Okay, it's kind of a question. Number 4, brand names generally serve 2. They signal quality. That's what they're for. That is the actual reason they exist. People don't, it's not just to waste resources, right? It's not to confuse customers. It's because when you're driving down the highway and you're like, oh, I need to stay in the hotel. And this is the example from the book, but I think it's great. You're like, oh, I'm really sleepy. I got to get a hotel room. Where do I stay? And you're like, over there is the blinking sign that says Bates Motel. And again, this is from the book. And there's like probably a serial killer that's going to murder me in a shower. Or should I stay at the Holiday Inn? and you're like, well, I don't think I'm going to get murdered at the Holiday Inn. So that's where you go, right? You're driving down the highway. You're like, I'm really hungry. Do I go to this random kind of sketchy looking place that sells hamburgers, where it's like Bob's Burgers? Well, I would probably go there. Or do I go to McDonald's? And you're like, well, I know McDonald's. It's really good, you know. So you go to McDonald's. Signals information, quality. Number 5, even if it's not good quality, but it signals a certain level of what you expect. Which true of advertising expenditures in monopolistic competition? They do not know. A is not true. Use only informational. No, they don't do that. They waste resources. No, they do it for a good reason. They attempt to create popular brand names. That's what it's for. D. And let's look at free response number 2. I bet it's really hard. When is product differentiation socially efficient? When is it not? Yes, when it increases information. And we'd say like good information, maybe. Like when it signals quality, that's useful. It's socially efficient. When it, when it helps people understand the product that they're consuming, because asymmetric information is a real problem in actual markets, and there's a huge field of study of it. Like I'm selling you something and you don't know everything about it, but it can help to solve that problem. So it can really help. Advertising is a good thing. And when we talk about it, right, a lot of times people think about advertising and marketing and they're like, oh, they're manipulating you. But reality, it's providing a social good. There's your capitalist shill of the day. No would be when it when it's disinformation, right? So like they can sometimes manipulate people, and when it actually reduces good information, that's when it's problematic and less socially efficient. We'd say that like when the brand names prevent new firms. So like if we said, we have all these brands and what it has the effect of doing is it's a barrier to entry, well, then that actually reduces the social efficiency of the market, because we want to have new firms entering and firms exiting and that sort of thing, rather than creating barriers to entry, because it creates more social efficiency in terms of the market. So at a certain point, things like brand names can get, even though they signal quality and they provide information, they can also create the problem of barriers to entry, which is not good, right? You'd want more firms to enter and exit. So, okay, so that bumbled my way through this section. I hope that this helped you. I'll see you next time.